The arrow's gonna need to stabilize after it leaves the bow, so I'm back here at 12 yards to give it a chance to make sure it's flying straight by the time it hits the 2x4, but this will allow it to be nice and stable and still have pretty much as much momentum as it's gonna have leaving the bow. I'm not trying to be any kind of super sniper here lying down. I'm just trying to give as small a target if anything comes back at me. Oh, sweet! Let's go check that out. That is so awesome. Oh, that is awesome. Right through and actually into a second 2x4. Really deep. It is almost all the way through. There are just a few fibers covering the tip. That is incredible, but I think it could do more. This is the same head because it was fine, but a new shaft, new arrow, because in cutting the other arrow out, I nicked it, and you don't want to mess with nicked carbon fiber arrows. Don't want it blowing up in the bow. Wouldn't be the bow's fault. Sweet! That is crazy. So check that out. That's crazy. It punched a hole. I don't know if it actually popped through and bounced off the back. I'd have to see what the slow-mo shows, but that's the arrow. It actually, the tip collapsed into the shaft, and that kind of robbed it of some momentum, but it certainly had enough momentum to punch a hole in a concrete block, and that's good enough for me. Enough momentum to punch all the way through one and almost two 2x4s in the side of a concrete block. That is a heck of a crossbow. Hey, thanks for tuning in to Twang and Bang. It probably doesn't surprise you that the arrowhead I used for those tests was no ordinary arrowhead. It's actually a 330-ish grain steel practice head that came with some explosive arrowheads that I tested a number of years ago. They turned out to be junk, didn't work, and this was the best thing that came out of the package. And it's ready to go for more testing, so I'm actually pretty excited about that. The bow that shot it is also no ordinary crossbow. It's the new TenPoint Nitro XRT. And while the crossbow world wasn't surprised that TenPoint came out with a brand new flagship for 2019, I was certainly surprised when it turned out to be the world's fastest production bow of any kind, capable of shooting an arrow at up to 470 feet per second while still covering you with a lifetime warranty doing that. And that also means that it has enough power to put an arrow like this through a 2x4, poke a hole in a concrete block. Of course, nobody hunts construction materials. That power also means that you're going to be able to take any game in North America while having more flexibility with your shot placement. And that's why the TenPoint Nitro XRT is what's coming up next on Twang and Bang. For 25 years, TenPoint has consistently had the reputation for being at the high end of quality. Now they also find themselves at the high end of speed. Their latest flagship bow is the new Nitro XRT, a quad-limbed reverse draw crossbow with every imaginable feature that can launch an arrow at a record-breaking 470 feet per second. The most notable feature of the XRT is its narrow 12.5-inch width with a relatively short 30.7-inch length for a bow with a 16.5-inch power stroke. 225-pound draw AccuDraw limbs are anchored into a beefy riser placed at the center of the bow, eliminating the front-heavy feel found in most conventional crossbows. 4 cables tie the RX-7 cams to the riser via turnbuckles that sit behind rollers. TenPoint calls this their slingshot technology, where the bend in the string induced by these rollers helps to accelerate the arrow upon release. TenPoint developed a double serving system that greatly increases string life over other narrow bows. That said, TenPoint still recommends you keep the deck lubed to reduce serving friction, which is why they include a small packet of lube with the bow. The synthetic stock is a single piece from tip to tail for added rigidity and support of the 20-inch fluted 7075 T6 aluminum rail. It's wrapped in Kui Verde 2.0 camo, as are the limbs. The forend has a standard sling stud, which allows use of Harris-style bipods. I installed a Picatinny adapter from Caldwell so I could use the Sierra S7 bipod supplied by Optics Planet. The buttstock houses an adjustable riser and butt pad to ensure shooters of all different sizes can get a comfortable and consistent position behind the scope. The pre-installed AccuDraw Pro cocking device sits out of the way on both sides with TenPoint's AccuTorque crank locked in its integrated storage underneath. This model is 43% faster than the original AccuDraw and is completely silent when cocking. Ample guards keep your fingers out of the path of the string and attached to your hands where they belong. Their rubber construction also allows them to act as massive vibration dampeners, contributing to the XRT's extremely quiet sound at the shot. The Nitro XRT includes the Evo X marksman scope, quick detach rings, and a bubble level. This 30mm optic allows a shooter to calibrate the multi-tension reticle for arrow speeds between 330 and 450 feet per second. The subtensions from 20 to 60 yards offer infinitely variable illumination in your choice of red or green. Subtensions for 70 and 80 yards are non-illuminated as their primary purpose is for competition and recreational shooting. 3 of the 6 included Evo X center punch arrows store in TenPoint's own quick detach quiver. A rubber loop allows a hunter to silently hang the quiver in the stand, while removing and installing the quiver on the bow is also silent with the cam-based locking mechanism. All of this stores nicely in the airline-approved TenPoint Stag Hard crossbow case, which kept this bow in perfect condition during shipping even though the box it came in was a little worse for wear. Like all TenPoint crossbows, the Nitro XRT is made in the USA and comes with a lifetime warranty. TenPoint includes 3 Evo X center punch arrows, and yes, they are arrows to head off a bunch of comments that I get on all of my crossbow videos. Pretty much all modern crossbows shoot arrows which plane in flight, meaning that they resist the pull of gravity. They have lift as they fly. Bolts do not generate lift as they fly. These are particularly nice arrows. They aren't just measured for straightness down to 1/1000th of an inch, but they're also weight matched in a package so that a package comes in at less than 1 grain of variance between all of the arrows in the package. Check this out. With the included 100 grain target tips, these arrows are built to average around 465 grains in total weight. With shafts and vanes and nocks and inserts and adhesive all capable of varying weights, TenPoint was still able to keep these arrows within 4/10 of a grain. 2 were exactly the same weight. That's phenomenal for factory arrows, but it should be no surprise to fans of the TenPoint brand. On the back end of the arrow is the new Alpha Nock. This is an aluminum deep groove moon nock. It doesn't clip onto the serving, but it has a very nice radius on both sides of the groove to allow the string to bend around the back of the arrow, bend around the nock without causing undue wear. It also ensures that the string angle itself doesn't push the arrow off of the string that can happen with much shallower moon nocks. One of the really cool things about this nock system is that you can choose which is going to be your index vane. You don't have to go with the standard factory index vane. All you have to do is pop it in. That is your index on the nock itself, and you can rotate and test your arrows to get their individual best spine. And this is just by hand. It's super easy to switch out. But you're never going to get this off of a vane because the plastic insert is glued in there, and that is indexed to the vanes. You're always going to get perfect alignment with the vanes, and then you just mark in that circle which is your index vane. Another really slick feature is the integration of a crank holder into the buttstock, and it locks it in there really nicely. This is the AccuTorque crank. There's a clutch pack in here, and it also doubles as a rear monopod for the stock. I think that's actually pretty slick. The AccuDraw Pro uses a 1/4-inch hex fitting, just like this 1/4-inch Allen key. So I can show you how this clutch works. Once you get the bow fully cocked, any further pressure on the crank is going to allow this clutch to slip, and that'll keep you from damaging the bow from overcocking. The cover comes off pretty easily with a screwdriver, and inside you can see the clutch pack. This can loosen over time to where the clutch slips before you get the bow fully cocked. It's just an easy matter of putting a 1/4-inch Allen key on that side, getting a 3/8-inch socket, and then tightening it gently. You just have to do ever so little to where the clutch stays engaged while you cock, but then slips when you get the bow fully cocked. I really love the way this just plugs in and pops into place. This is even designed to keep the handle from twisting, and you can choose whichever way you want, but this is the way I want to keep it oriented when I'm shooting or where I'm taking it through the woods. That's actually a really cool system. Cocking the bow with the AccuDraw Pro is not fast, but it is easy. It involves a number of steps. First thing you need to do is release the lock on the AccuDraw mechanism itself so you can pop it out of the stock. And now you stretch it out over the string and make sure that the cord for the AccuDraw is not caught on the scope itself. Then you're going to flick this mechanism in its closed position, pop out the crank, put it on the fitting, and then just crank away. And cranking is completely silent. There is a safety latch in there, but you don't hear the clicking of a paw like you do with other cranks on bows. You get it fully cocked, the clutch engages, and that way you can't overcock it. The safety is automatically engaged when the string seats itself in the latch. Now, in order to put the AccuDraw mechanism back in its place on the stock, you're going to crank it with a little pressure, flick the release mechanism, and now you're going to be able to slowly, gently release the string pressure off of the sled. The latch is going to bump, or the crank is going to bump into the latch, but that's not a problem. Then you just slide it out the rest of the way by hand. Make sure it doesn't hook onto the scope. Put it back into place, and then lock it down again. And then, of course, you can put the crank back into the stock. Oops, I want to get that, set it that way. And that's how you cock it. From this angle, you're going to see a couple things as I cock the bow. First, you're going to see the string engage these rollers. That's going to keep the string from getting dragged across these cable turns. It's only going to be for part of the draw, though. As the limbs bend in more and more, the cams are going to place where the string starts past these rollers, and so it's going to be a straight shot back to the latch. Of course, as you pull the trigger, that's going to be reversed. The limbs are going to pull out, and eventually the rollers are going to engage the string and actually help accelerate the arrow along. The second thing you're going to notice, only because this is a relatively new bow, TenPoint times the cams, considering the fact that the string and the cables are going to stretch, but you're probably not going to want to retime the cams yourself. So they have a little bit of extra preload, if you will. And on a new bow, the cams are going to swipe across the string stops. They tell me that that is something that goes away as you break in the bow. As your string, as your cables stretch, that's not going to keep happening. As I'm cocking the bow, you can also see how the Vector Quad 4-cable system keeps the RX7 cams in perfect alignment with the string throughout the full draw. This greatly reduces stress on the limbs, eliminates a common source of vibration found in other crossbows, and prevents undue pressure between the string serving and the rail. I use Reinhardt foam targets because I've found they are the best speed bow targets. But since they're foam, they can really grab onto arrows that get buried into them like is going to happen with this Nitro XRT. So I just take a little bit of silicone and I wipe it down on the shaft. Yes, this is going to allow the arrow to penetrate a little bit more in the target, but it's also going to allow you to get it out of there. The plastic inside of these foam targets can sometimes weld itself from the heat of stopping these arrows onto the arrow itself, and then it kind of gets, I've had to cut arrows out of targets to get them out in the past, but this is kind of like putting a Teflon coating on a pan. Yes, you're going to be generating the heat. Yes, this is going to make the arrow get in there deeper, but it's going to make it so that the target foam itself doesn't stick to the arrow. And I wipe down a new arrow like I just showed there. Between shots, I just give it a quick cleaning, make sure there's nothing on there. Loading an arrow is super simple. Just put your index vein down and then slide it back until it fully seats. You're not going to feel a click or anything like that because these are moon nocks, but as soon as you get that good resistance, you know it's fully seated. That said, you don't have to worry about the arrow falling out because it is still retained in there very well. I can't even pull it out of the latch mechanism. It's locked on there tight. The safety isn't silent, but it's nearly so. Just put your thumb at the back and then slowly push it forward. Now, with a lot of safeties, you can pinch the mechanism and try to move it slowly, but I find that it's actually louder if you do that. I don't know why, I haven't figured it out, but the quietest way to flick this safety off is just with your thumb and push it from one side. The safety isn't technically ambidextrous, but you do see that there is an opening in the receiver for you to be able to switch the lever from the right side, which is how it's set up at the factory, to the left side. You might do that because you're a left-handed shooter, or you might do that because, like me, you're a right-handed shooter that prefers to move the safety with your support hand. That way you don't have to take your hand off of the grip after you've aimed. TenPoint calls their new trigger the T5, and it's their best trigger ever. It's got a very smooth pull and a nice, clean break. Like other crossbows with really nice triggers, the T5 trigger is what I would call a rolling trigger. It's not like a two-stage where you have initial travel and then a back wall and then the trigger breaks, but you do have a very consistent pull until you get to the point where the trigger just breaks. And that point is extremely repeatable, it's extremely predictable, and it makes shooting the XRT accurately super easy. Same hole groups at 25 yards from a bow like this should not surprise you, but just listen to what it sounds like. You aren't going to have the excuse that the deer ducked your arrow with this bow. The Nitro XRT can launch the 370 grain Pro Light arrows at a record-breaking 470 feet per second. The included Evo X arrows might weigh 465 grains, but they are still super fast when launched by this bow. You really will get fast at this, relatively speaking, once you get some practice in. It's not something you're going to do and get a follow-up shot, but that's really not what you should be thinking about when you're archery hunting in the first place. Oh man, got another one of those. It thinks it's a rifle. No comments from you anti-crossbow people. It is not an arrow gun. Beautiful. Look at that. That's a 2 feet per second spread. That's 0.5% spread between those three arrows. That's what you get from weight matched arrows that are also constructed so well. I'm gonna have to run a calculation on what that turns out to be in momentum. Just a second. Okay, so the Hornady Lever Revolution 140 grain 357 Magnum load out of a carbine generates right around 28 pound-feet per second, which is exactly what this is getting. This is 28.2215 pound-feet per second of momentum. Momentum is different than kinetic energy. Momentum is the tendency for one of these arrows, when it hits something like bone, to keep going. When you think about how a 357 Magnum slug, 140 grain, out of a carbine plows through a deer's shoulder, these arrows can do exactly the same thing. This thing generates exactly the same momentum as a 357 Magnum carbine. That's insane. With included arrows, the Nitro XRT also generates 186.5 foot-pounds of kinetic energy, which is as much kinetic energy as 38 Special out of a snub-nose revolver. Of course, momentum is really what matters to an arrow, because what you're trying to do is get your broadhead through the vitals. That's momentum. But I still think it's pretty crazy to think that there's a bow out there that generates that much kinetic energy. MSRP on the Nitro XRT is $2,550, which makes this one of the most expensive bows that you can buy. Of course, for that, you're getting the top quality bow that you can buy. You're getting the fastest bow that you can buy, and you're getting a bow that's made in the United States. I think one of the things that's most remarkable to me is for all the accessories that are attached, this has zero buzzing at the shot. There are bows that cost very similar to this that make a lot more noise when you pull the trigger, and I think this gives them less of an excuse for doing that. Of course, you don't need the smoothness of the Nitro XRT to take game. You don't need the speed. You don't need the power that this generates. But if you're looking for the best bow that money can buy, I think many people agree that this is it. If you want to learn more about the Nitro XRT from TenPoint, be sure to click the link in the video description below. Be sure to follow me on Facebook and Instagram. You can see the links down here. And be sure to sign up for my mailing list, because it's the only way you can be sure to stay in touch with me no matter what happens to my content here on YouTube. I really appreciate you watching Twang and Bang, and hope to see you next time.